Illinois Department of Transportation in partnership with Illinois State Police as well as other agencies. Just real concern with crashes that occur in the work zones, not only for the safety of the workers, but safety of the motoring public as well. And you know, they've changed these laws and adopted laws and increased the fines really as a way to send a message to the public that, you know, we're serious about safety in work zones and it's for the benefit of the citizens as well as the workers.
All right, well, we're going to talk about a couple of things. First of all, you know, when do you deploy them? How do you notify the personnel or people that it's in the specific area? And then how are we sure that it's the specific driver that we're looking for? So let's talk about, first of all, when are they deployed and where are they deployed? Work zones always?
It'll be typically your construction seasons, usually like beginning of spring through late fall. And what we'll do is there'll be a media blitz, media campaign at the beginning of the construction season. You know, one, just to remind motorists that construction season's about to begin again, about safety. They'll remind them and talk about the use of the photo enforcement vans, and to just kind of reinforce those laws and remind people it's time to pay attention to what you're doing and to slow down.
Now, do you actually post signs, hey, this is a photo enforced area?
Yes, we're required, before we can use and deploy a photo van, there has to be warning signs within that area that state that there's a photo enforcement taking place.
Now, when sometimes the construction only takes place during normal working hours, let's say, there's signs and the barricades are up and in position. Is that photo enforcement still being enforced even though there's no workers present?
No, you'll see the signs that generally within a construction zone, those signs are going to be permanently mounted that those there is automated enforcement taking place. However, another part of the law is that workers must be present for photo enforcement.
I wasn't aware of that. Okay. But still, I mean, if you don't see workers, we still want you to obey the traffic laws and understand the situation.
It's still a work zone. There still might be reduced speed and other restrictions placed in there, but for there to be photo enforcement, there have to be workers present.
The interesting thing about photo enforcement, there's nothing arbitrary about it, is there?
No.
That's you, buddy, in that picture.
Right.
And here's the mile. How do they calibrate these things? I mean, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but some of these people, especially on an interstate, might be traveling at a high rate of speed. How is it capable of doing that?
The photo says it's a high-speed digital camera, and it's a system put together in the van that'll capture vehicle speeds and then take the subsequent photos at the same time.
So it operates like on a radar system, much like most of us are used to. We know that you could tell how fast we're going based on some kind of electronic device aimed at that vehicle.
There's a mounted radar in the unit for across-the-road radar, and that's what actually captures the speed.
And there's a camera that just clicks automatically when something triggers that speed limit, I would assume?
There's two cameras in the van, one at the rear of the van, one at the front of the van, and once someone exceeds the designated speed limit, the photos will take place.
It's coming and going that they get you.
Right. They'll take photos of the vehicle as you're approaching the van and then photos as you're...
Well, and perhaps that's a good question. Let's say I am approaching the van in the work zone, and there are workers there working, and I'm exceeding the speed limit. What does that camera see when I'm coming onto the site and speeding?
The camera will see it's aimed at the roadway, and it'll see your entire vehicle, and it'll take pictures of the vehicle, the driver, the license plate, everything we would need to identify the person in the vehicle and the violation.
Okay, so you would, once you obtain this picture, it's developed, I don't know what that process is, but that's not important to this program. Let's say you get the picture printed out, so you would just run the license plate, I would assume, to find out who the owner is?
Right, we'll get that information back, who the registered owner of the vehicle is.
Okay. Now what if I let my daughter drive my car, and she is the one that was captured in the picture, but you don't know who she is because it's registered to me. So how does that work?
We'll do photo comparisons before we actually approve and issue a citation for an offense. If we're able to identify the driver, we'll issue a citation to that driver. If we're not able to identify the driver, we're not going to issue that citation.
Okay. So you're pretty specific, and I remember my training on this. They stressed this, that unless we're 100% sure of who it is, we're not going to issue that ticket.
Right.
I mean, and that speaks well. So, and again, I don't want to ask you anything that's, that you don't want to answer publicly here, because you might be held to task with that later. But let's say it is my daughter, so that would just go away, or would you call me up and say, all right, who is this?
Well, there's a couple of things that can happen. One, if we can't identify the driver, we may essentially void that citation.
Okay.
We won't approve it, and that part is pretty much over in the process. If it is issued, say to you, you get it and you say, well, that's my daughter. By law, you're not liable for that citation because you're not the driver.
I wasn't in control of the car. Okay.
But with each citation, the recipient will receive a set of instructions as well as an affidavit. And they have the opportunity to complete that affidavit saying, it was not me driving, however, here's who was driving. So say you received that citation, you could fill out that affidavit, complete it saying, I was not the driver.
However, so-and-so was.
Right.
Now, would that person get the ticket then?
Yes. What will happen is you would mail in that affidavit. The citation would essentially be generated for that driver. We'd still do a comparison to make sure that we can identify that driver, and then a citation would be issued.
Let me ask you something. These are age-old questions that I'm sure you get every time you've written someone a ticket. How do I know that particular radar device is calibrated?
And that's why we have an operator that actually sits in the van while the van's deployed, and one is to make sure all the equipment is working. The radar is calibrated and
so they'll do that every day. I would
every
assume.
time the van's deployed, right? There'll be a trooper in that.
So when and I know the answer to this, but for our viewing public, when you go to court, the burden. I mean, as a police officer, you have provided proof to the court that this individual was speeding. The burden would be on the individual to prove that it's not accurate, and that's probably not very likely to happen.
In the case of the photo van, it is very, very difficult.
So my point that I'm trying to get to in a delicate way is that if we've got your picture and the trooper says you were speeding, you're guilty.
Right.
Okay, and the judge is going to pretty much find that way. 99.99% of the time, I would assume.
I would hope.
How long have we been doing this now, the photo enforcement?
It's been, I believe the first operators were trained in 2005, 2006.
So it's been around a while.
Yes.
So if you've been driving for any number of a year or months, you're aware that these things happen. Do you stay in one part of the state more than the other? I'm sure Chicago gets some more construction than we do, but I mean, you're all over the state with this thing.
Right. There's actually several photo vans deployed in the state, and they'll move around the state based on the needs and the construction zones that are present in the state.
Now, is Illinois the only state to do this, or is this something that everybody's doing now?
No, there's several states that do photo enforcement.
Okay. And you know what, let me ask you this. People are under the impression that when you guys come out, you guys meaning police officers, come out in full force, that somebody's needing to meet their quota. Are there quotas?
No, we don't have, there's no quotas.
And every police officer I've ever talked to has said that. That doesn't mean there's not special details that DOT is, hired back on for seatbelt or drunk driving things where you're specifically looking for that. But just because you're writing someone a ticket doesn't mean you're trying to make money for your office. You're actually wanting people to do what?
Slow down and
be safe, I would imagine.
And something I think a lot of people don't realize is general traffic violations, the state police do not see the revenue from that. The revenue is dispersed to entities other than the state of Illinois.
And perhaps that's a good point. Your motive is not a financial one, it's safety. A state trooper's job, while he's patrolling the interstate, is to do what, essentially?
It's really promote traffic safety and at the same time educate the public.
So you were there for our safety. It's not like you're there to be the bully of the interstate. And you'd be quite happy to not write tickets, I would assume.
That would be, if no one was breaking the law, we'd be fine with that.
You wouldn't even need the job. But Anyway, I'll tell you what, Sergeant Jarod Ingebrigtsen is going to come back with me in just a minute. We're going to talk more about photo enforcement as Circuit Clerk Presents continues, so don't go away. Welcome back to Circuit Clerk Presents. We've got an interesting guest today. He's a sergeant with the Illinois State Police. His name is Jarod Ingebrigtsen, and he is talking to us today about photo enforcement. That's the trucks you see in the work zones on the various interstates throughout Illinois, taking pictures of people speeding in those work zones. We're going to talk to Jarod more about that. Jarod, we've talked about what the system is, what it's designed to do, and your goal is not to make money for the state. It's actually to get people to drive safely in these work zones.
Right.
And we've talked about how you are sure that the individual is the one that's being ticketed, because if you're driving into the scene, the workplace, it actually takes your picture, takes a picture of your vehicle, it takes a clear picture of the license plate and the person driving, coming to the vehicle, and then once the vehicle has gone past it, it takes another one from behind. And I assume that is to verify
if
that the plates are the same, or
right, if the license plates are the same, and also if they don't have a front license plate on, or if, say,
and some states don't require
right,
that.
So it's really the picture of the vehicle going away is more for vehicle identification purposes.
Well, you had mentioned that, look, when you come onto this work site, you are given ample warning. We've got signs, we have laws that we have to follow. Can you describe that for me? If I'm driving on the interstate and I'm approaching one of your sites, what am I going to see as a motorist?
One of the first things you'll see is the Department of Transportation is real good about setting out advance warning of their construction zones several miles in advance of you actually approaching the construction. And now most of the interstates have the overhead message signs, and they'll use those to let you know construction ahead, slow down, or there's traffic backup. As you get into the construction zone, you're not always going to see workers right away. You're not always going to see barricades or the construction barrels. It depends. There's some construction zones are very short, some are very long. So that's going to be kind of dependent on the zone itself. But one thing we do in District 9 in Sangamon County when we deploy the photo van is we make sure there's the photo enforcement signs as required, that state there is automated enforcement. But we make sure those signs are posted after every possible entry to that area. So if you're coming on in the middle of that construction zone, you're going to see a sign that warns you that there's automated enforcement systems in place before you'll ever get to the actual photo enforcement van.
So this proves that you're not trying to write tickets just to write tickets. You're saying, look, buddy, we're giving you every warning we can. Please don't do this.
Right. And there has to be a reduced speed for us also to deploy the van. So, and you're going to see that clearly marked too, probably several times in a construction zone. And a lot of times they're actually on trailers that have flashing lights that, are again warning you, speed's reduced. And usually you'll see a general gradual reduction. If it goes all the way to 45, go from 65 to 55, and then bring you to 45 once you get especially close to the work.
Is there a set speed for a construction zone, or is it dependent on the type of work being done?
It's dependent on I think really the setup of the zone, how it's arranged and what they're.
But you're told
doing.
what that requirement is.
Right. You'll see it'll be a black and white sign that says speed limit, and if usually
it could be 10 miles an hour
or
or whatever, right?
Theoretically, it could be, but typically it's 55 or 45 when you're out on the.
So you're trying to keep the traffic moving.
Right.
So and on top of the van, there's even a flashing sign, isn't it, that's saying, here's your speed is indicated here.
Right. There's a speed board on the top of the van. When it's deployed, that board will be raised, and it's visible from a good distance from the van. So as you're actually approaching the van, you'll begin to see your speed and other vehicles' speeds. And that's not going to be the actual speed that is detected at the time of determining whether or not a citation's issued. They're two separate radars.
That serves as nothing more than a warning.
Right. It's an informational sign and advance warning. So we're trying to really give motorists every opportunity to slow down, because our goal, again, is we want you to slow down.
Sure.
Because if you don't slow down, sure, we might generate a citation after that, but if you're going through that work zone at 80 miles an hour, it doesn't benefit us. Sure, we can issue a citation several days later, but those workers have already been jeopardized.
Now, if you hit somebody in a work zone, and they usually have these signs posted, there's a specific fine for that type of thing.
Right, there can be, depending on the circumstances of the crash and the incident. I mean, you can be looking at several years in prison and a very high fine.
Serious consequences. And I remember several years ago, the state was so concerned that people were being killed on the interstate, these workers, highway maintainers, whatever, that they instituted these things, and it's a very serious crime now.
Yes.
Let me see what happened. Let me say this: when you get a ticket, how much is that ticket cost normally?
In Sangamon County, if your supervision for it is typically around $390.
That's for one ticket for speeding. That doesn't mean you hit anybody. That doesn't mean you wrecked your car.
Right.
That's just for speeding. $390 on average.
Right.
That's some serious money.
And again, it's because it's not a typical speeding offense.
Right.
It's not like your regular speeding violation that you get. It's going to be speeding in a construction zone, which carries the higher penalty.
Is that a mandatory appearance? You've got to go to court if you get one of these tickets?
Yes, and that's a question we get a lot is, I just want to pay it, why do I have to go to court? And that's out of the hands of the Illinois State Police. The Illinois Supreme Court sets forth certain traffic offenses that require a court appearance, and speeding in a construction zone, because of the severity of the offense and the potential for danger when you're speeding in a construction zone, that's been designated as a mandatory court appearance.
So if you're from Texas and you're visiting here, or from Chicago or whatever, or you're on your way to work, if you are ticketed and you are ordered to court to pay that fine, you have to show up.
Yes.
And the questions we get, you know, I am from Texas, I won't be here on that date, or my daughter's getting married in Sheboygan, I won't be here, can we reschedule? Well, that's where you would call the circuit clerk's office, not you, or not your department, and then we would reschedule that, make every effort to reschedule that, to work with folks. But it's an expensive, must-appear ticket for you, and we will be ready for you here at the courthouse, because we get a lot of these. How many tickets do you guys write a year?
It depends on the amount of construction in the season, but I mean, you can, again, it's a very efficient system, because you're not actually having to go out and stop every car. So it's a very efficient and produces a lot of citations if people, and our goal, again, is if we can deploy the photo van and not have any citations generated, that's great, because that means people are obeying the law, and that, you know, the van has done its purpose in slowing people down.
Oh, okay, you told us earlier that once your picture's taken and through your process, you are sure who you are ticketing here, that ticket is sent in the mail to the individual that's registered to that vehicle.
Well, it's whoever we identify as the driver.
Whoever, yeah, that's better said that way. What's the process after that? They just get the letter saying you must appear on this date?
They'll receive a copy of the citation, an informational letter outlining the procedures and what they need to do. Basically, the citation will have a court date and time and location on it, and then they'll need to appear in court on that date. Or, again, as we talked about, if it wasn't them, they have the opportunity to complete that affidavit and send that in.
And if they don't complete the affidavit, the process continues without that affidavit.
Right. Whether it was them driving or not, once that citation's issued, it needs to be answered in some manner, whether by completing an affidavit and sending that in, or appearing in court.
Now, some people will come to you, I'm sure, and say, look, I'm looking at this picture, there's no workers in this area when I was ticketed. You know, why am I being ticketed?
Right. And that's very common, because most of our photos you won't see workers, and because our goal, again, is to slow you down before you reach the workers. So we're going to deploy in proximity to workers and where workers are present, but we're not going to be right where the workers are. We're going to deploy well in front of them, so that people are slowing down before they ever get to the workers.
But it's still a work zone and still a valid citation.
Right. Even if you don't, and that's another question we receive is, look, there's no construction going on in this picture. There's no barrels. There's no markings. I don't see any signs. Again, every construction zone is different. Those things don't need to be present in the picture. And again, our goal is to slow you down before you actually reach the workers. So you may not see any signs of construction in your picture. But that's another reason we have the officer in the van is before he deploys the van, the operator will actually drive that area. One, to make sure it is a construction zone and it's properly signed for both the photo enforcement, for construction zone purposes, and for speed limit purposes. They'll make sure the workers are present and where those workers are in relation to where they may deploy. And they're going to make sure the conditions for deploying the van are safe.
If you find that an individual, when you run the registration from this ticket, this picture, and you find that the individual is suspended, what do you do?
The law with photo enforcement does not allow us to do any enforcement other than the speed enforcement. So it's not a witch hunt. Again, it's not just driving for financial benefits for the state. It's trying to slow people down. So the photos, we're not issuing seatbelt citations. We're not issuing being on your cell phone in a construction zone. It's strictly for speed enforcement.
Now, as a police officer, you could write somebody for being on their cell phone in a work zone, I assume,
Right.
or not wearing their seatbelt. You have the legal authority to do that, but you're not enforcing that through this camera system. So if they see my picture and they don't see the seatbelt on, they're not going to write me for a seatbelt violation.
Right. The photos are used strictly for speed enforcement.
Speed enforcement. Well, and again, you have laid out very well that the legislature very much had in mind that this was to be a very specific thing. So many warnings must be given, and your parameters are very limited. So they've thought this thing pretty well through. So the average person getting a ticket can be assured that no, you were violating a serious law and you were given plenty of warning. You're pretty much the dope that should be getting a ticket, and that's my words, not yours.
Right.
That's interesting. So what is the difference between perhaps the photo enforcement in a construction zone than we had one of our friends earlier say that the tollway system up north,
Right.
where your picture gets taken?
Right. The tollway, they also have been, they've used photo enforcement in the past for speeding, but they have photo enforcement for their tolls, for toll violations. And that's handled a little differently. It's handled administratively through the tollway system initially, if you receive one of those. So it's somewhat similar, but it's still quite a bit different than our system.
So it's not like they're not related at all. One has a specific purpose for speed enforcement, and the other they will send you the bill for passing the tollway, I guess. If you're getting in the wrong lane, if you get in the I-pass lane and you're not supposed to, they'll send you the bill for the I-pass. At least that's what the cameraman just told us, because it happened to him. Okay, let's talk about state police in general here. We've got 2 minutes left of the program. What is the mission of the state police? What do you folks do?
Our core mission is, providing and promoting the safety of the citizens, and a large part of that is traffic safety. And by that too, again, we like to educate the public. It's not all about going out and writing citations and ticketing people. It's about educating the public too. And programs like the photo enforcement van, seatbelt programs that we have, the goal is to promote voluntary compliance. We want people to comply with the laws. It would be a great day if we could go out there and not see anyone speeding, everyone have their seatbelt on, no one's drinking and driving. That would be a great day for us. Unfortunately, realistically, that won't happen, but that's what our goal is. It's voluntary compliance, and whether we can generate that through education or if it has to be because we're going to have to issue citations, that's what our goal is, to generate voluntary compliance with the laws.
You're a different legal enforcement agency than a city or a county policeman or whatever type of police agency. You guys have a tough training, rigorous training program to become a state police officer.
Yes, it's up to about 26 weeks now of training that you'll go through at the Illinois State Police Academy. and then that's followed by a field training program.
So you guys not only do the physical aspects of it, because